If you feel like the truth is being kept from us, know that you're not alone. I'm Detective Ozma, and my mission is to dig up the evidence behind the mysteries they want to bury. Today, I'm opening a file that started with a single pilot, flying alone, who looked out into a clear sky and saw something that shouldn't have been there. June 1947, over the mountains of Washington State. What begins as a routine flight turns into something else the moment a flash catches his attention. Then another. And within seconds, what seemed like nothing becomes a formation, multiple objects, moving together, fast enough to defy anything known at the time. And what makes this case different, is what happens after. Because this doesn't stay with one witness. It spreads. It multiplies. And within days, it turns into something the entire country is forced to confront. When I opened this case file, the same structure kept repeating: a trained observer, independent confirmations, and a reaction that goes far beyond a single sighting. Evidence 1, the original sighting over Mount Rainier. On June 24, 1947, pilot Kenneth Arnold reported seeing 9 bright objects flying near Mount Rainier. According to his testimony, the objects moved in formation, weaving between mountain peaks in an irregular pattern, something he compared to a saucer skipping across water. He estimated their speed between 1,200 and 1,700 miles per hour, far beyond the capabilities of known aircraft at the time. He also stated that the objects had no visible tails, no conventional wings, and reflected sunlight intensely. This is direct eyewitness testimony from an experienced pilot trained to identify aircraft and aerial movement. Evidence 2, corroboration and the spread of the phenomenon. Arnold's sighting didn't remain isolated. Within hours, and in the days that followed, multiple independent witnesses reported seeing similar objects in the same region. A fire lookout described flashes moving across the sky at the same time. Another observer reported a group of bright objects traveling together at high speed. Then, on July 4, a commercial airline crew reported seeing multiple disc-like objects while in flight, describing movements that did not match conventional aircraft behavior. At that point, the pattern was already forming. Multiple witnesses. Similar descriptions. Same time frame. And as these reports spread, something else began to take shape. Arnold had described the movement of the objects, but the media transformed that description into something more concrete. Within days, the term flying saucer entered public vocabulary, and from that moment on, the phenomenon didn't just grow, it began to replicate. This is corroborated testimony from independent observers and aviation personnel, combined with documented media amplification of the event. Evidence 3, military attention and conflicting narratives. As reports increased, the military began to take interest. Kenneth Arnold was formally interviewed by intelligence officers, and internal assessments indicated that he was considered a credible witness, someone who had genuinely seen something unusual. But publicly, the explanation took a different direction. Official statements suggested that what he saw could be attributed to mirages or atmospheric effects. So within the same case file, 2 narratives begin to form, one acknowledging a real, unexplained observation, and another attempting to resolve it through conventional explanations. Evidence 4, the first major UFO wave. After Arnold's report, sightings didn't slow down, they increased. Across the United States, hundreds of similar observations were reported within weeks. Many described bright objects, unusual speeds, and formation flight patterns consistent with the original sighting. This marks the beginning of what is now recognized as the first major UFO wave in modern history. And importantly, many of these reports came from trained observers, including pilots and military personnel. Evidence 5, the institutional response. As the reports continued, the response didn't stop at individual investigations. Within months, the U.S. Air Force established Project Sign, followed by Project Grudge and later Project Blue Book, programs specifically created to collect and analyze reports of unidentified aerial phenomena. Over time, thousands of cases were documented and reviewed. While many received conventional explanations, a portion remained officially classified as unidentified, even after investigation. So what begins with a single sighting, eventually leads to a long-term institutional effort to understand what was being reported. This establishes a documented pattern, repeated sightings, ongoing analysis, and no complete resolution. Hypothesis 1, the conventional/cautious interpretation. From a cautious perspective, this case can be understood as a combination of natural phenomena and human perception. Some analysts suggest that Arnold may have observed distant objects under unusual atmospheric conditions, where light, distance, and motion can distort how speed and shape are perceived. Reflections, optical effects near mountainous terrain, or even known objects seen at unfamiliar angles could create the impression of something faster or more structured than it actually was. In this view, the key factor isn't the objects themselves, but how they were interpreted in real time, without reference points. Under this interpretation, the case remains historically important, but not necessarily anomalous. Hypothesis 2, the unresolved interpretation. The alternative interpretation begins with the consistency of the reports. A trained pilot describes multiple objects moving in formation at speeds beyond known aircraft. Independent witnesses report similar observations within the same timeframe. And internal military assessments acknowledge that something was seen, even if it wasn't identified. What stands out here isn't a single detail, but the pattern. Multiple observers. Similar behavior. No clear classification. From this perspective, the case represents more than a misidentification, it represents an early example of a phenomenon that resisted explanation, even when investigated. Not proof of extraterrestrial origin, but a documented event that remains unresolved within the available data. Either way, one thing remains unchanged. This didn't stay as a single sighting. It became a pattern, and once a pattern forms, the question is no longer what was seen, but why it kept happening. I'm Detective Ozma, and I'll keep gathering every fragment, every voice, every piece of evidence they try to erase. Many stories get buried, but never forever. If you, or someone you know, has ever witnessed something unexplainable, leave your story in the comments. Or, if you'd rather stay anonymous, send it to the email pinned in the comments. Who knows, maybe the next file I open will be yours.